You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to episode 10 of Ethnocynology with David Ian Howe. I'm your host, David Ian Howe. I recently did a video on anthropology and the apocalypse and kind of laid out several movies and books and TV shows and just other media that have to do with the apocalypse, but specifically like ones that have to do with dogs. I Am Legend being probably the most recognizable one with the dog, a boy and his dog and stuff. But one movie that I completely forgot to add to that list was Children of Men. And that's one of my favorite movies. And I also recently just watched that with my mother. And movies and TV shows, I often rate on a scale of did my mother hate it or not. This movie I thought she would like, but she didn't hate it. So therefore, I think it's a good movie. I also myself think it's one of the best movies. It's an excellent film. Yeah, so Children of Men is directed by Alfonso Cuarón is his name. He also directed Y tu mamá también, which is like one of the best Spanish-speaking films, I think, like known to the English world. It's got Diego Luna in it, and I don't remember the other guy, but he also happens to be in Station 11, which is the movie or TV show I talked about in the apocalypse thing. Anyway, that's digressing. Alfonso Cuarón's an excellent director. But what I'm going to talk about with Children of Men here is the dog aspect, of course, but also why this film is still relevant today. You know, kind of like, I guess my personal connection with it would be let's see if my mom liked it. But the dog aspect, but also it's pretty relevant today given the state of the world. And yeah, it's like I'll give a quick, if you haven't, how would I say this? If you haven't seen the movie, I recommend watching the movie before you listen to this podcast, but also like it's been out for over 10 years now. So if you were to listen to this podcast, then watch the movie, it might make it better for you because you'll understand it more and also be like, oh, that's what he was talking about. So no, that's fine. We're living in an era of spoilers. So yeah, so that'll just be like the quick introduction. The plot summary of Children of Men is, how would I say this? And maybe not even the plot summary, just the, back of the DVD thing is that like, it's not an apocalyptic film in a sense. Like there's not like a giant nuclear holocaust. There's not there's no zombies or anything, but it's a very unique one in that all of the humans on Earth are no longer fertile. I don't remember if it's just the women are infertile and can't conceive, or if it's the men that are infertile themselves too. I'm not sure. But the beginning of the movie opens up with, and it stars Clive Owen, whose name is Theo Farron in the movie, who is just like, it takes place in London, or the UK, I should say, starts out in London. And what's the opening scene of the movie really is he's going to get coffee in this, they don't have bodegas in London, but whatever it's called. Like you go, just some place to get coffee shop. And in the coffee shop, they're watching TV and it's the news and the youngest person in the world. So after people, like the last kid born before everyone went infertile was this young kid. I believe he lives in Brazil. I want to say baby something. I forget what they called him. Anyway, he was the youngest kid alive. He was like 19. But because of that, he's a massive celebrity because he's the youngest person on Earth. And all these people kind of not worship him, but venerate him in a way of like, they're holding on to the past and the old ways. And this guy, he's the last piece of hope that the world has, And in an altercation with like a fan or a fanatic, he gets stabbed and he dies. So the youngest person in the world dies, and that's the beginning of the movie. And then as he walks out of that coffee shop, like narrowly misses it, like he like maybe takes 2 buildings down the street of that building, it gets bombed. There's like a bomb, and then you find out, of course, like, okay, there's like terror attacks in London and things like that. And one of the really interesting things about the movie, which the plot, I can explain here in a minute, but the world building of this film is insane in that you see like news snippets. I think it takes place in 2025, if I'm not mistaken, 2022, maybe. Yeah, it was filmed in like 2000, or it takes place in 2027. I'm sorry. The movie came out, I want to say in like 2008, maybe. I could be wrong. Anyway, so it's anticipating a future, and not everyone's just constantly on their phones, because we wouldn't have anticipated that in 2007, I guess, the same way. But there are kind of futuristic TV screens all around. Like, London's a very high tech city in the same sense as like New York, with the TVs all over the place, and it's Times Square, especially in New York, but London has its own versions of that, and just like futuristic. And on these TV screens that you see in the coffee shop, or that you see in, on TV at the house, you hear it on the radio, you notice that London, the UK, is the only place that's still like running. There's massive protests, massive war. There's the siege of Seattle, I think they said, or the Battle of Seattle is mentioned on the news. You can see this upheaval in China, I think they mention. But there, when he's on the bus, public transit in London, going somewhere, you see like this like thing showing you how there's turmoil all over the world, and like everything's on fire because the world is ending. No one can have children anymore. But it says the UK stands alone, or like only Britain remains, I believe is what it says. And you find out quickly, much like I mentioned in that last video, about how in these movies, fascist dictatorships often take over because it's the only way to like secure the country, and Britain is taken over by an extremely xenophobic fascist dictatorship. Well, we don't even know if it's a dictatorship. It could be like an oligarchy. It could be a democracy of some kind, but we just know that they do not like foreign aliens. They do not like, there's very xenophobic. And by foreign aliens, I mean anybody. They show like people in cages. They like, everybody gets deported. Only if you're a British citizen can you be here. Like, they're rounding up migrants and they're sending them out, which kind of relevant to today. Sending people out, and like you see frequently throughout the movie, like people in cages. And at one point, like there's an officer like walks on the bus and he's like taking people and putting them, like, arresting them and sending them out of the country. And he's like, "You people make me sick." And it's like such a distinct, like, I don't think our problem's like that bad yet. We're not looking at people as like, vermin. And that sounds like rough to say, but the movie really shows you like how that could go in an apocalyptic future like that. But of course, Britain remains because of that. They're like deporting all these people. They're keeping the borders extremely secure. They're not letting any terrorism. They're not letting any, I guess you could say, drugs. They're not letting any like other political or anything else. They're just keeping Britain. And that's like all they can do is just keep their heads down and keep going. And everyone in the movie still has a job, kind of like the guy's still going to work. And he even goes to work after like the place gets bombed. I digressed a bit. And he goes back to the, his job, and everyone's just kind of watching TV, or they're, watching YouTube or the news on their computers in their cubicles, watching that this kid in Brazil got stabbed. It might be Argentina. I want to say it's Brazil. Doesn't matter. Some Latin American country. The youngest man in the world was killed, and everyone's like depressed and sad. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to go home. I'm quite depressed about baby Elliot," whatever his name was. And the boss is like, whatever. Like, you can just tell it's like, there's a genuine feeling of like bleakness. And this is just part of, being in Britain, is the sky is always gray. I noticed that when I was there, if it's not raining on you. But the whole movie has a very gray, dark tone to it. And everyone's just like melancholic and stuff. But the main plot is, and you see many signs throughout the city too, of like, there's mandatory fertility checks for men all over the place. So that's right. So men, I guess, can be fertile. It's just as women can't conceive, maybe, is the point. I don't remember if they established that. If you've watched the movie, let me know in the comments. But either way, there's like mandatory, it's like a fascist dictatorship. Like, we need to have children. There needs to be some kind of cure. And then there's a group of, well, I'm getting into the thing, but we'll get to that. There's a resistance movement. There you go. That's what I was going to say. And there's a resistance movement to the fascist dictatorship. And there's also the birthing project, I want to say, or the rebirth project, which supposedly is somewhere outside of England. I believe it's in the Canary Islands, which is, those are the Azores or the Canary Islands off of Africa or Spain. Anyway, somewhere that's not Britain, but you can't leave Britain. You can't come into Britain. But let's see. The main plot, here we go, is that You find out that Clive Owen used to be part of this separatist, I wouldn't say terrorist group, but a resistance movement to what's going on. And he is, kidnapped into a van, and his ex-girlfriend, who's American for some reason, tries to bring him back. And they're like, hey, I know you have connections. They kidnap him and like basically be like, I know you have a connection with this guy in the government. I need you to get us passports to get out of or to go north to this other part of England, or I think just to get to Bristol, which Bristol is the port city off of London. I can't recall. I should have wrote this down, but point being, they need him to help them get a government favor to smuggle somebody, and you're not sure like what the deal is yet. And then you find out as you go, and you like find out more about their relationship with in the past, these people used to be dating. Okay, it's like world building, and you still see more stuff around Britain. People are going to, there's a dog racing thing. And this is part of the dog thing, that he goes to a dog racing thing, which I know is big in England. But there's like people are betting on dogs. There's no children, so there's just dogs everywhere. And you see that, and every scene down the street or like in people's houses, there's always a dog because there's no children to be had. And there's also this interesting scene too, where he finally goes to this guy's house to ask him for this political favor of like, can you get his passports to get us out of here? And his like son, who is like probably in his late 20s or 30s, is at the table just playing video games and with his headphones in, and like he's being kind of babied in a way. And you get this world building sense of like, okay, children are still if a parent has a child, even if that child's older, they're still babying the child or their offspring as if it's like a baby, because like that's just what you do. And if you're young, like you would probably just want to live that way anyway. And it's just very interesting. You'll have to watch the movie. I'm probably making that sound weird. But anyway, so they get this political favor from the guy, and Clive Owen, the girl or his ex-girlfriend, this other lady, and this other young lady, I can describe that more in a minute, are going north to this base where I could not remember the name of the group. Anyway, the resistance movement. They go, Clive Owen and his girlfriend, or his ex-girlfriend, and these two other women, and a guy who is the guy that was in 12 Years a Slave. Can't remember the actor's name. This is an excellent podcast. I'm sorry. I'll put that up here. They're going north to get to this place. And once they get to this like farmstead, where like this Polish guy allows the resistance movement to be there, Clive Owen finds out all this to say that the young woman, I believe she's Jamaican, I can't remember her accent, she lives in Britain anyway, pregnant. She reveals, like, she opens up her like robe, and like you find out she's pregnant, and that's like kind of a shock to the movie, and you're like, whoa, what? And this Clive Owen character, whose name is Theo Theo, which now I'm just realizing Theo means theological. He has no faith in the world, right? But wow, I just did that in my head. Here we go. Well, great world building, great writing. He's kind of cynical, and he drinks. He has a terrible drinking problem. The world's ending. He's just like done. He's like, whatever. Doesn't even care about work and stuff. But he sees that this girl's pregnant, and then he kind of like has this like face glows of like, whoa. And then he realizes, I'm sorry, before that, his ex-girlfriend was like murdered in an attack by just random people in the woods that just attacked the car, because why not? It's, an apocalyptic, it's a pseudo-apocalyptic story where the apocalypse has yet to happen, but it's starting because no one can have children, if that makes sense. And Britain's still trying to hold on to whatever's left of like functioning society. And as we know from anthropology, like society, and this is the Malinowski thing, culture, works to benefit the individual, but it keeps groups cohesive and stuff like that. But culture exists to, benefit you. How would I explain this? Culture exists to benefit the individual, but by collectively like participating in the same culture, it helps everybody at the same time, if that makes sense. So keeping Britain running and operating in this way, and going about your day-to-day business just makes the average person like Theo in this film like have something to live for, So we find out then the girl is pregnant, and he's immediately like, oh man, I have to, right. And I said this, his girlfriend was murdered, and then he's like, okay, I got to carry on what she wanted. And I understand why this was so crucial, but she wouldn't tell him what was up. And he realizes in the rest of the movie, he's doing like everything he can in his power to get this girl to where she needs to go because she's the, future of humanity. Actually, this will be a great time for a commercial break. We'll be right back. And we're back. So obviously this girl's pregnant. The point of the movie would be bad if she just dies, but she ends up having the baby. And they get put in this migrant detention center, and she's about to give birth, like she's having contractions. And the other lady that they were with was like a doula, I guess, or like a midwife. Well, you find that out actually. Yeah, she used to be a midwife, and she worked at like a hospital where they deliver babies. And she remembers like the week where it just like all of her business just disappeared. Like everyone just stopped having babies, and that's when she gave up with hope. And it's just like one of those nice little monologues between her and Clive Owen and like this nice little setting. And the girl that's pregnant is out like on a swing set, like in this, bombed out building or abandoned building, not bombed out. Just like, it's just the juxtaposition and the world building and the themes and the setting of the movie is just kind of bleak, but you get these little human moments and like anthropological moments in that sense. And let's see, we did the plot summary. I'm trying to think of how to like go about this to make it. I guess I'll just tell you the rest of the plot. Yeah. So they get stuck in this migrant detention center. They're trying to go north or to Bristol. I can't recall. And they get caught and they get brought to this place and this migrant detention center. And they get put in like a ghetto, essentially, like in World War II Germany, full of immigrants. And there's this one lady is, gypsy would be the word I would say, but Romani, she's speaking Romani is her like culture or whatever. I know gypsies like not, they call themselves gypsies. I think you can still say gypsy, you can't use gypsy in that derogatory term. Anyway, she's speaking Romani. She has a dog with her the whole time. She's holding a pet dog. And that's like, she's treating it like a baby, talking to it like it's a baby. And they find her because she was one of the connections in this like ghetto migrant area that's like barricaded, kind of looks like, an outdoor prison. And the poor woman ends up having the Romani lady takes her to this place. She ends up having the baby on this like disgusting mattress in this like abandoned building. Well, not abandoned, it's full of migrants and stuff. It's really dark, has the baby. And then the next day, like someone comes in and the dog sniffs out that there's a baby under the blanket. It's interesting, the dog aspect. And then let's see, she has the baby. And at this time, as she's having the baby, and like the day she has the baby, I should say, I don't want to say it's the Muslim Brotherhood, but it's like there's definitely like an Arabic Muslim Islamic group that is fighting the government. But alongside that, like they're the most organized and they're chanting in the streets and protest. They're having a funeral for somebody. And then they start shooting, and there is then like the other like there's like that's like a distinct faction of people that are fighting the government. And as they do that, the other like let's say other immigrants from Europe, like there's a lot of Russian ones. I heard a guy speaking Polish. There's a lady speaking Romani. There's people from Jamaica. There's other people. There are Asian people there too in this ghetto area. They all rise up too and are fighting the government at the same time as that's going on. And there's like this giant war-torn scene of like. It's a very long take, and something excellent about this movie is the cinematography and the long takes of all these shots where you are stuck in the action with him in this extremely stressful situation where there's a baby. The lady just gave birth, so she's probably exhausted. I'm assuming there's a lot of pain involved in that. Like, if you just had a baby the night before, you don't want to be running for your life the next day. And they're like, running for their lives and like running into these buildings. It's urban warfare. The British government's or the British army is shooting these rebels, and the rebels are, insurrection, whatever you want to call them, resistance fighters are this like ragtag group of like migrants. They're shooting back at the government, and they end up finally leaving that area only after some of the British soldiers bust up into this room they're holed up in and see that she has a baby. And as they see that the girl's carrying a baby, the military stops. What's the word? I'd have to watch the movie again to remember like what there was like 3 different factions fighting, but they both were Two of them are fighting the British government. They all stop. They all stop fighting when they see the baby. And there's like this big scene where they're like walking down the stairs of an apartment building with like the British military and resistance fighters all staring at her. Like, and the British guy calls like ceasefire, ceasefire. And the baby's walking down the stair, or the baby's not. The lady's bringing the baby down the stairs. And so is Clive Owen and the Romani lady, I think. And the Romani lady's trying to find them a boat. And they had told him, you need to get to this boat or get a boat and then ride out to this buoy that's at the, so I guess they are in Bristol, ride out to this buoy where the ship will pick you up and will take you to the, I want to say it's the Canary Islands where this birthing project is, where they're going to take her to safety. But at the end of the movie, Clive Owen, he reveals that he got shot and he like dies in the rowboat. And she's just like left sitting in the rowboat with the baby, but the boat shows up. So it's a very ambiguous ending of like, does the world get fixed or not? It's up to you. But the main thing here is that when everyone was like fighting in this ghetto in London, or like migrant concentration camp ghetto in London, everyone stops and they like see this baby because it's like, that's what they're all fighting about. Because like everyone's dead. They're all going to die if you can't have children. So you can see the hope in everyone's faces as this baby comes down the stairs. And it's like kind of wild. And yeah, so I would say now that you got the plot down, sorry for the spoilers, the key themes of this movie would be that I've written down here, like hope versus despair. Theo's transformed from like this cynical dude, kind of like Joel in The Last of Us. He's an alcoholic into drugs. Joel is in the show. I don't think there's any drugs involved in Theo's character, but definitely alcohol. From a cynical man to a believer in change. The xenophobe, like it's a commentary on the real world, like refugee and like migrant crisis is going on, especially in Europe. It's pretty bad. And like this was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this movie came out. So it's like it was already, talking about that then. But the movie shows how bad it will get in the future or how it could get. But the government control and resistance of this movie, the clash between the oppressive systems and the underground movements. They go underground movement, not resistance movement or partisans. That's the word I've been thinking of the entire time. Thank you. Partisans. But parenthood and the values of like how the absence of children reshapes society's priorities. Everyone's kind of just bummed out. It's bleak. There's not much going on. Michael Caine, I didn't even bring up his character. He's a minor character in the movie. You see him several times. He's like an old friend of Theo and like this old hippie guy. And they go hide out at his house and stuff. But at the house, you're learning that Theo and his ex-girlfriend had a baby a long time ago. And it's kind of like The Last of Us in that sense too, where Joel lost his daughter. Can't remember her name now. He's reluctant to take on the task of smuggling Ellie, there you go. Taking Ellie across the country to the fight. It's the same kind of thing. She's got the cure for the fungus virus thing that's going on in The Last of Us. They're trying to get her across the country to a resistance partisan base where they can do research on her to fix that. And then in this movie, obviously, it's they're trying to get a pregnant woman to a birthing center where they can research, how she's able to be fertile, blah, blah, blah. But in Michael Caine's house, you're finding out like the young girl learns more about Theo, his past, and that he had a baby and like, why he's just so jaded and stuff. But once he finds out that she's pregnant and like once she has the baby, it's like game on for him. He's like, we gotta, like, I have the chance to save the world here. I'm going to do it. And he does it for his, ex-girlfriend as well. We'll be right back after these messages. And we're back. I want to say one other thing here before we get into dogs, the cinematic techniques and the world building. I kind of said that like Alfonso Cuarón has these signature long takes, kind of like Miguel Sapochnik does in Game of Thrones. If you remember the Hard Home episode of Game of Thrones where Jon Snow is trying to get all the wildlings safe south beyond the wall because they're going to get killed by the White Walkers and the White Walkers attack. It's this big, long, one-take thing. There's the Battle of the Bastards has a big one-take thing. Miguel Sapochnik's excellent at that, but so is Alfonso Cuarón. And in this movie, like the long takes keep you in the action. Like a cut and a take and a stuff always take you out of the scene for a second. If it's done really well, obviously you still stay engaged in the movie, but like when you're watching this movie, especially in that big, long partisan versus British government sequence, and like there's like, I can't grab, there's just like shouting and chanting and stuff, and like people screaming in the background, and there's bullets and there's explosions and stuff. Like you're all stuck in it with this big long take following these people, which is a testament to the acting of the movie, like how they all remember exactly what they're supposed to do as the camera follows them through like a 10-minute long scene full of action and like with thousands of extras in there. Because I said there was that group with the Islamic funeral procession where they're like chanting and shouting and shooting guns in the air, and like just all of that coordinated is crazy. But like another thing here too is kind of like in The Last of Us, or as opposed to A Boy and His Dog, which is in the distant future, nuclear wasteland. Fallout is like hundreds of years from now in a nuclear wasteland. This film has a near future setting, kind of like Station 11 or The Last of Us or 28 Days Later. It's like it could happen tomorrow, kind of, and that makes it eerily realistic. And it does have, and what I wrote this down here, but I meant to say this earlier. It's a distinct lack of traditional exposition. Like viewers learn through immersion. There's no thing in the beginning of the movie that tells you like, you know, the rest of the world's on fire, Britain stands alone kind of thing. They don't tell you about the partisan movement. They don't tell you any of this stuff up front. Like, you know, Star Wars tells you with the big scroll in the beginning of the movie. You learn this all yourself as the movie goes. And Cuaron doesn't expect you to be stupid. Like he wants you to like be able to pick up on these cues and things like that and learn about that as it goes. And I think that's like excellent storytelling, the lack of exposition. But with that lack of exposition, this feeds into the dog thing. I noticed the first time I watched this movie was like 10 years ago, I think in college. And college is more than 10 years ago now. Whoa. The first time I watched it, I didn't notice the dog aspect, and I wasn't like, you know, the dog guy at that point. So I didn't really think about that or notice it. But this time around, watching it with the idea of like, oh, how do the dogs play into this? Every scene has a dog for the most part. Every setting they go to, I should say. Maybe not the coffee shop in the beginning. I'll double check. But the farmstead they go to, or the cottage they go to, or I guess we would call that a ranch here in America, where they go, there's dogs all over the place. The dogs chase the car. There's the dog racing scene. There's the people just all over the place are holding dogs like babies. And in the migrant detention area, we'll just call it a ghetto because that's like kind of how it was designed to look like a Warsaw ghetto. It just like there's dogs all over the place, and it adds to the chaos too. It's another layer of this. The dogs in the movie like barking constantly all over the place while people are talking adds to that chaos. But you can see people are dressing their dogs up in clothes. They're carrying the dogs around. They're feeding the dogs with a spoon and a fork, you know, like treating them like humans and babies because there's no babies left. I find that pretty interesting. But they're like emotional replacements. Like in a world without babies, like you lavish like attention on dogs. You know, like it's like you're just gonna, because I already do that. I don't have a child, and I just did ologies with Allie Ward. And I was talking with Allie like we were doing the podcast, and I asked her like, you know, what do dogs mean to you? And she explained to me she can't have children, so she, to her parents and her in-laws, like not detestment, but you know, like they laugh at it. They treat their dog like a baby. Like they, you know, do have birthdays for it. They do all sorts of stuff. I found that to be a really interesting answer to the, you know, what do dogs mean to you? Because to her, she can't have a child. So that dog is their family. And you see in this movie, like that exact thing happens. And another thing too, that goes into the cinematic aspect, like the cinematic cues, there's always frequent shots of people holding, petting, and mourning dogs. There's a dog funeral at one point. There's like a dead dog at one point. It always cuts to that. And it's a movie that's so high budget and so well written and so cinematic. Those things are always intentional. And I noticed that, not to be like a film buff or like a movie snob, but like I do often, especially as someone who edits video all the time, things that are in there are intentional. Like I want to make sure it's in there, something that's irrelevant, I try to keep it out. But if it's an intentional thing, it sets up something later, I try to add that. And in this movie, for sure, all of these things with the dog, like random shots of dogs, like in people's houses and a dog having a birthday party and stuff is like, or a funeral, sorry, adds to this like world building. And it adds to the, oh, you're supposed to pick up on this, that like human culture has shifted away from taking care of human babies to like dogs as their surrogates in that sense. And then the psychological impact of that, how this reflects humanity's need to nurture and care for something. Kind of like I said with the guy, he was probably in his 50s, the guy Clive Owen was trying to get the passports from or get the government favor from, and his son was at the table playing video games. The son was probably my age, but he was being treated like a baby or a kid. He's playing video games at the table, which is something I did when I was 8. But like humanity has to nurture in that sense. So kids would be taken care of in that sense. It's all you really have. It's like what you would hold on to. And then another thing here would be like comparisons to real life. Are we seeing a similar shift in modern society? And like Allie was a great example of that. Like, yeah, my dog was my son. I treat dogs and like animal, like I always say hello, sir, when I meet a new dog. You're like, how do you do, mister? Like, it's just because it was funny to me, but it also just like, they're an organism that thinks. So I do often try to like, it sounds dumb, but like meet them on that level. I talk to them. I'm like, how are you? Nice to meet you. I say that to dogs all the time. And that's just me being goofy, but like people just do that. You narrate what your dog's thinking and stuff. I don't want children, really. That might change if, I meet the right person. They're like, let's have a kid. But like, I just truly have no desire. So dogs and cats and stuff for me are what that's going to be. Maybe I'll get a llama too. I don't know. But like, probably not. But like a dog for me is like what I would have. And that's the most experience I've had with caring for something as my cat too. But like a dog, posting pictures of him, having birthdays for him and stuff. Society is shifting that way. And we know people did that in ancient times, of course, too. Like they cared for their dogs, gave them. So I talked with Flint Dibble in that one episode, how he saw like ancient Greek pottery and like art. There's like people feeding dogs scraps and stuff. And you can even see that zooarchaeologically, that some days dogs get like better cuts of meat because you can see the gnaw marks on the bones. It was around these feast times. But yeah, that's really it. What makes Children of Men a timeless film is just like it can happen tomorrow. Like everyone could just go infertile tomorrow. Maybe it's a virus. Maybe everyone's on Ozempic now. Maybe Ozempic in 10 years like does something that makes everyone infertile. That's not medical. That's not medically sound. Apparently Ozempic's like a wonder drug that is curing a lot of stuff and seems to have no negative side effects. Will that turn into a zombie virus later? Who knows? Probably not. But just in case, that was a bad example, but it could be just to be a virus. Something gives a virus could make everyone infertile. Maybe it's the microplastics in our body, just something. It can happen. They don't explain it in the movie, but you fill in the gaps, and that's also good writing because they don't tell you exactly what happened, but you just know that everyone's infertile and it's a huge issue. So then and then it being a huge issue is so well written and there's such a big story around that, it doesn't matter how it happened because the writing is that good. So something like that. You can fill in the gap yourself of what happened. My personal takeaway from watching the film is, I don't desire to have children at all. Like my friends are like, just like all of a sudden are like, let me have a kid. And I'm like, I've never had that desire whatsoever. Like I lack that. But like seeing a movie about how a baby changes, people's opinions. And once he sees that the lady's pregnant, whether it's not his hormones really, but it's just like his mentality changes. I assume if I had a partner and she was pregnant, my hormones change. I don't know how that works. Again, don't quote me on the science on that. But anyway, there's something there, right? Like there's babies change people. They change your lifestyle, your character. Like everyone I know that has children is like, once you're a dad, like it's just different. Like things, you change perspectives and stuff. So the movies shows you that. The film's near future setting, I wrote that, lack of exposition, blah, blah, blah. Oh, right, I'm in the wrong spot. Yeah, and I put this on does my mom hate it or not movie scale. I got her to watch Lord of the Rings with me finally a couple years ago for Christmas, and we watched all 3 of them, not extended. I wasn't going to kill her with the extended. It'd be 12 hours, but we did do 9 hours of movies, and I said, what would you give that? And she said, I'd give that an 8 out of 10. And like the Lord of the Rings was very good to her. She wouldn't watch it again. Can't stand it, but she suffered through it. And I respected that. She likes Forrest Gump. She likes a lot of, she likes like Bridgerton. She watches that kind of stuff. She watches like this one show, a lot of stuff on Acorn and BritBox, whatever it's called, where it's all British crime dramas from like the 90s. And like, I don't know why she's obsessed with those, but whatever. There's better. The Dune 2 is much better than that. There's another show where there's like this Australian doctor nurse guy goes into the outback and like a plane and like saves people way out in the outback. Like, you know, her taste in movies is much different than mine, but she loves Tarantino. She loved Inglourious Basterds. Like we watched Django twice together in the theater. Like randomly, she like loves movies. And this, I figured my mom would very much enjoy this. She liked The Last of Us. And on this one, she was just like, I can't remember what she said. Not that she didn't get it. She was just like, it was just a movie. Like, I think that was her answer. Like, it just was. So whatever. But she didn't hate it. So therefore, it's a good movie in my eyes. And I know she wants like a grandkid real bad too. So like, you know, maybe I shouldn't have showed her that. But that besides the point. Final thoughts. But yeah, people listening, I know on Spotify now you can leave comments. Leave us comments. What did you think about the movie? Did I butcher the thing? Am I missing main parts of the movie that I should have added? And here on YouTube as well. Give me some, you know, comments. What do you think about Children of Men? Are there things that I'm missing? Are there themes that you picked up on? If you have children, I don't have children, right? And watch this movie. If you have children and you watch this movie, what do you think? Like, your perspective is probably different than mine. But mainly, though, the whole thing about this, and it's a dog podcast, or dog archaeology and anthropology podcast. What's the anthropology of this to you? Like, obviously, we're seeing a lot of this stuff play out today in like the modern world with the, you know, insane migrant crises all over the world. And like this movie is very like an example. I would say that this movie is, especially with that guy who was like, you people make me sick. Like it was like, and he was just staring at like Clive Owen, who's like a white dude, like on the bus. He just like, just because they're migrants, the guy said that. That's a good example of we don't want to get there. We don't want that. That's a bad outlook to have. That guy probably sucks when he goes home, and he sucks when he's at work, you know, clocking in as a soldier or a National Guard guy, whatever he was. I don't know if there's a king or queen in the movie. They don't say that. It doesn't matter. We know it's a cautionary tale of like, we don't want things to get that bad. And here's another thing too. Here's another thing to ask yourself. If tomorrow everybody was infertile, what would you do? Would you continue working? Would you adopt a bunch of dogs? Would you just give up? Well, like what would you do? Like what's that anthropology? And like, I would say this as someone who appreciates human behavioral ecology. The point of life is to get enough resources to have enough energy to reproduce. Like, that's just how biological life works. That's what Darwin figured out. That's just how things work. So once you can collect energy or collect resources to get energy, but you can't reproduce, you can still reproduce. Well, you can have sex, obviously, but you can still reproduce socially. And that's like another thing too. Reproduction doesn't necessarily mean just sexually reproducing. Like human culture reproduces, like you're passing that on along with the genes. And that's an important part of what makes humans distinct from the other animals is our culture reproduces and evolves too. So in this kind of world, what are you going to do? This is kind of a bleak. Here's the thing. I made an outline for this episode, and listening to it right now myself, having just talked this long, I don't think this was a great episode. No, I shouldn't say that. This seemed more chaotic trying to stick to a script than to not. But yeah, just I put bullet points here. We were talking in the APN chat about like, you know, do you have a script or you don't? That's why I'm bringing this up. But if you didn't like this episode or whatever, but yeah, I liked this movie. I thought it was great. It's a very cautionary tale. It's good. If you haven't seen it, I'd watch it. Let me know what you think, and especially the dog aspect. If you saw the scenes in the movie that I can't quite remember. I know specifically the dog finding the baby is a big one. The dog's alerting people several times, but the dog racing and just dogs all over the place. But the Romani lady carrying the dog as a baby is very interesting because the key is running with the baby in her arms, but so is the Romani lady at the same time. They're running through this like battle zone or war zone, and she's like holding a dog just like the baby too. It was very like interesting juxtaposition, which in another movie with different music would be funny. But in this movie, it's like bleak because they're both holding on to hope in a sense. So anyway, I shouldn't have said that. I don't think this was a great episode, but it was more chaotic than I had planned it to be. But please rate and review the podcast on Apple and iTunes if you can. If you can rate it on Spotify, that would be awesome. If you're listening on Apple and Spotify, if you're here on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment, like I said earlier, what you think about this movie. How about this? I said I was going to make episodes on the different apocalyptic movies with dogs, or just some apocalyptic. 28 Days Later doesn't have dogs in it, but it's still worth talking about anthropologically. Which one do you want me to do next? We'll do that. So let me know. Think on that. And with that, I will see you guys next week.
The Archaeology Podcast Network is 10 years old this year. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy, our social media coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht, and our chief editor is Rachel Roden. The Archaeology Podcast Network was co-founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in 2014 and is part of Cultural Media and DigTech LLC.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.